In 1996, a small, quiet town in Pennsylvania became the setting for one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in recent history. What began as a tragic fire at an abandoned warehouse turned into a chilling tale that still puzzles investigators and locals alike. Amid the charred remains of the building, rescue workers discovered something they couldn't explain: a single severed hand, perfectly intact and completely unburned. To understand why this discovery was so perplexing, we need to go back to the night of the fire. On the evening of August 14, 1996, at around 10:45 p.m., witnesses reported seeing thick smoke rising from an old textile factory on the outskirts of town. The building had been vacant for years, with no electricity or reported activity. Yet the flames tore through it with an unnatural intensity. Firefighters arrived within minutes, but it was too late. The structure was engulfed, and it collapsed into a smoldering heap. At first, authorities assumed it was a case of arson. Locals had long complained about vandals and teenagers sneaking into the building. But as investigators sifted through the debris, they stumbled upon something that made their blood run cold: a perfectly preserved hand buried under the rubble. The fire had incinerated nearly everything in its path, leaving behind little more than ashes and twisted metal. Yet this hand was untouched, as though the flames had deliberately avoided it. It didn't take long for the coroner to determine that the hand belonged to an adult male. But there was one problem: no other remains were found. The discovery led to a series of questions that no one could answer. Who did the hand belong to? How had it survived the fire? And most importantly, where was the rest of the body? Forensic experts examined the hand in detail, but their findings only deepened the mystery. The tissue showed no signs of burning, freezing, or any other condition that might explain its preservation. Stranger still, the fingerprints didn't match anyone in the national database. It was as though the hand had appeared out of nowhere. Theories began circulating almost immediately. Some believed the hand belonged to a transient or homeless person who had been squatting in the building. Others speculated that it was part of a gruesome prank or an attempt to send a message. But things took an even darker turn when locals started connecting the hand to the building's history. The factory, it turns out, wasn't just any building. In the 1940s, it had been the site of a series of grisly workplace accidents, earning it a reputation as cursed. One of the most infamous incidents involved a man named Leonard Hart, a factory worker who lost his life in a horrific machinery accident. According to local legend, Leonard's body was never recovered in full. His right hand had been severed and was said to have never been found. Could the hand belong to Leonard Hart? Skeptics dismissed this theory as nothing more than a ghost story, but others weren't so sure. Paranormal enthusiasts flocked to the site, claiming the hand was a sign of unfinished business. Some even reported seeing shadowy figures near the ruins late at night, though these sightings were never substantiated. As investigators continued to dig into the case, they uncovered one final twist. A man came forward claiming he had seen someone fleeing the scene just before the fire started. He described the figure as tall, wearing dark clothes and carrying what looked like a bag. However, when police followed up on the lead, it went nowhere. The witness's description was too vague, and no suspects were ever identified. To this day, the mystery of the hand remains unsolved. Some believe it was an eerie coincidence, a piece of evidence that had been overlooked in the chaos of the fire. Others think it was something far more sinister, perhaps a relic from a crime that had been covered up for decades. What's undeniable is the lingering sense of unease that the discovery left behind. The factory has since been leveled, replaced by an unremarkable strip of land. But for those who remember the fire and the hand that defied all logic, the questions remain: whose hand was it? And how did it survive the flames? Maybe we'll never know. On October 15, 1983, at around 9:45 p.m., authorities in Clearwater, Florida received a panicked call reporting a fire at Bayside Funland, a small amusement park popular with locals. The fire had broken out inside the park's haunted house attraction, the Spectre Spree, trapping dozens of visitors inside. The Spectre Spree was a dark, winding maze filled with animatronics and low-light effects designed to disorient and scare its guests. Witnesses later described how the fire began. Dim lights flickered, and many riders initially believed the flames were part of the illusion. By the time they realized it wasn't, it was too late. Thick, toxic smoke quickly filled the tunnels, and the walls, made of old wood and cheap insulation, became a death trap. For those inside, the darkness and the chaos made finding the exits almost impossible. Those who escaped described scenes of terror, screaming, collapsing walls, and burning mannequins indistinguishable from victims. Firefighters arrived within minutes and battled the flames for hours, but the damage was catastrophic. The Spectre Spree burned completely, leaving behind a mass of charred remains. In total, 10 lives were lost that night, including 7 children who had been visiting as part of a local youth group. Amid the devastation, survivors spoke of a haunting image. A group of teens who escaped early recalled seeing what they described as a silent figure standing outside the haunted house moments before the fire. Dressed in a long black coat and wearing an expressionless white mask, the figure watched as the building went up in flames before vanishing into the crowd. At first, investigators believed the fire had been an accident, possibly caused by faulty wiring. The park's aging attractions had been cited for multiple safety violations over the years, and the Spectre Spree had no sprinkler system or proper emergency exits. However, as forensic teams combed through the wreckage, they made a chilling discovery: traces of accelerant in several spots within the maze. The fire, it seemed, had been intentionally set. The investigation quickly turned toward arson, but finding a suspect proved difficult. Witnesses couldn't agree on key details, and the silent figure became a ghost story among locals, part of the tragedy's growing lore. Over the years, speculation about the fire has only deepened. Some believe it was the work of a disgruntled park employee, as the owners had recently laid off several staff members to cut costs. Others point to rumors of gang activity in the area, suggesting the fire may have been retaliation for unpaid debts. But the most chilling theory involves Bayside Funland itself. According to court records, the park was struggling financially in the months leading up to the fire, and insurance payouts from the tragedy saved its owners from bankruptcy. While investigators never found concrete evidence, some suspect the park's management may have had a hand in the blaze, using the tragedy as a way to collect insurance money. Adding to the mystery, survivors and rescue workers reported strange occurrences in the months following the fire. Several claimed to hear faint laughter near the ruins of the Spectre Spree late at night, and others spoke of shadowy figures moving through the debris. Local paranormal enthusiasts insist that the tragedy left a dark mark on the site, but skeptics attribute these stories to overactive imaginations and trauma. In 2010, nearly 3 decades after the fire, a retired firefighter came forward with a shocking revelation. He claimed that, while combing through the wreckage in 1983, he found an unburned object, a porcelain doll, completely untouched by the flames, sitting near the ride's exit. The doll had no connection to the attraction, and no one ever came forward to claim it. Though authorities dismissed it as an eerie coincidence, conspiracy theorists latched onto the story, using it to fuel their claims that the Spectre Spree fire was no ordinary tragedy. To this day, the cause of the Bayside Funland fire remains unsolved. While the official report lists it as an arson case with no identified suspects, the mystery surrounding the silent figure and the untouched doll has kept the story alive in Clearwater folklore. Whether the fire was an act of greed, revenge, or something more sinister, one thing is certain. For those who lived through it, the memories of that night still burn. Alex Harper was an American performance artist whose work in the 1980s and 1990s blurred the line between art, risk, and sheer madness. Known for his unorthodox and often dangerous performances, Alex wasn't interested in creating something visually appealing or marketable. Instead, his art was about exploring the limits of human endurance, vulnerability, and the relationship between the artist and their audience. Alex's career began in 1984 with a performance called Sealed, where he locked himself inside a plexiglass cube for 7 days with only a gallon of water and a small hole for air circulation. The performance took place in a gallery, and visitors were invited to watch as Alex endured extreme temperatures, sleep deprivation, and isolation. Many found it fascinating, while others were horrified, accusing Alex of glorifying suffering for attention. The controversy only fueled Alex's ambition, and his performances grew more extreme. One of his most infamous pieces, Pulse, 1986, involved Alex hooking himself up to a heart monitor on stage. A timer was set to trigger a loud explosion if his heart rate didn't remain steady. As the audience sat in tense silence, Alex performed a series of stressful tasks, solving complex puzzles, walking barefoot over shards of glass, and even holding his breath for extended periods. The performance ended without the explosion, but the tension in the room was unforgettable. However, it was in 1988 that Alex truly shocked the world with a piece titled Static. For this performance, Alex hijacked a live radio broadcast under the guise of being interviewed about his art. Midway through the show, he interrupted the host and began reading a rambling manifesto about the dangers of complacency in modern society. As the host and producers grew increasingly uneasy, Alex suddenly pulled out a knife, holding it to his own throat. The show was cut off moments later, but not before thousands of listeners heard Alex calmly say, "This is art, because you're listening." Alex's willingness to put himself in harm's way became his trademark, but it also sparked serious backlash. Critics accused him of being reckless, manipulative, and irresponsible, while others praised his bravery and commitment. Perhaps his most controversial performance was Pendulum, 1990. In this piece, Alex suspended himself upside down from a steel beam, while a giant, sharpened pendulum swung back and forth just inches from his body. The pendulum, attached to a metronome, swung closer with every tick. The performance lasted for 2 hours, with Alex remaining motionless the entire time, his face just centimeters from the blade. While most of Alex's performances resulted in no lasting harm, his 1992 piece, Target, almost cost him his life. For this performance, Alex stood in an open field and allowed participants to fire paintball guns at him from a distance of 50 feet. While the guns were supposed to be loaded with non-lethal paint rounds, one participant brought their own equipment, firing a modified round that left Alex with a fractured rib and internal bleeding. Despite the incident, Alex refused to press charges, famously stating, "Risk is part of the process. If you're not scared, it's not art." In his later years, Alex shifted to creating installation art, though his pieces still carried the themes of danger and vulnerability. One such piece, Glass House, 1998, involved a fully transparent home filled with fragile glass furniture that visitors were encouraged to walk through barefoot. The slightest misstep could shatter the delicate environment, forcing visitors to confront their own fragility. As for the deeper meaning behind Alex's work, opinions remain divided. Some view his performances as a critique of modern society's apathy, a way of forcing audiences to confront fear and mortality in a safe environment. Others see them as little more than elaborate stunts designed to provoke outrage and attention. Alex himself remained cryptic about his intentions, famously saying in a 1995 interview, "Art doesn't have to mean something. Sometimes it just needs to remind you that you're alive." By the time of his death in 2003, Alex Harper had left behind a legacy of performances that still spark debate and discomfort. Whether his work was a genuine exploration of human limits or simply a dangerous game, one thing is certain: Alex never stopped testing the boundaries of art and himself.